Hey, what's going on, everybody? Jonathan Thames here of Rosie and Ernie Productions, and welcome back to the Multimedia Megafan movie and television channel. And on today's video, to celebrate the release of Godzilla vs. Kong, we're going to take a look at the films that originated these two characters and pit them against each other. So stay tuned to find out which OG film reigns supreme. We're going to start off with 1933's King Kong, released by Radio Pictures, produced and directed by Merian C. and Ernest B. Schoedsack, and starring the talents of Fay Wray, Robert Armstrong, and Bruce Cabot. Now, there are definitely a few elements of this film that don't exactly hold up well, but I still have to say I really overall like this film very much, and I would easily give it a rating of 7 out of 10 based off of my most recent viewing. The first screen we get post-credits is a still shot of a screen of an old Arabian proverb that reads, "And the prophet said, and lo looked upon the face of beauty, and it stayed his hand from killing. And from that day it was as one dead." This immediately and effectively presents the theme of the power of beauty, even over a powerful being. The plot centers around a voyage headed by filmmaker Carl Denham, who has a reputation for being reckless, fearless, and secretive, and is seeking to make the largest motion picture of his career yet on a location that he doesn't even disclose to the skipper or the first mate. The movie starts out when a theatrical agent comes on board to tell Denham that he hasn't been able to find an actress to take on the role due to the secretive conditions and the dangerous reputation that Denham has. So, Denham sets out to find one on his own before the voyage begins. While searching, he encounters a young woman who is down on her luck named Andaro and offers her the role. After convincing her, they head to the ship and the crew sets sail the following morning off to their mystery location. Anne and the first mate, a man named Jack, quickly develop a rapport despite Jack's objection to having a woman on board, and he becomes weary of the potential unknown dangers that Denham plans to put her into. Denham relates Jack's softening feelings of Anne to the Beauty and the Beast theme intended for his film. As they get closer to their destination, Denham reveals to the skipper and to Jack that they're actually headed to an off-of-the-grid, primitive island location that is rumored to be the home of an extremely powerful entity named Kong, whom he hopes to develop his film around. They arrive at the island with a huge wall separating the main island from the shoreline village, and discover the natives who inhabit the island chanting the word Kong in what appears to be a ceremonial island ritual. They are discovered as Denham tries to set up a camera to capture the event and are confronted by the leader of the village. The ritual they stumbled upon was meant to be a marriage ritual where a bride had been chosen to be given to Kong, but when the head of the tribe sees Anne, he makes a bargain to trade for her to become Kong's bride. The crew refuses and heads back to the ship to get Anne to safety. Later that night on board the ship, Jack confesses his love for Anne in kind of a strange way by today's standards.
Say, I guess I love you.
Oh, be still my heart. But he's called to the bridge, and Anne is captured by a group of natives who sneak aboard from their rowboats and taken back to the island to complete the ceremony for Kong and become his bride. This is where the movie really starts to shine. When the islanders walk Anne up to the big entrance of the border gates and up those stairs to the platform she's tied to, it's cinematically masterful. The set, the score, and the cinematography all work very well together to create a very big, horrific environment and build up the tension very well in the scene where we await the arrival of Mighty Kong. When Kong arrives on screen for the first time, it's a big moment in cinematic history, as the world had never seen effects applied like this before. And for that time, it was extremely groundbreaking and effective. Kong, now revealed to be a giant gorilla, is mainly portrayed through claymation, though there are a few moments where he is puppetized. Interestingly enough, I read that they intended on using a rubber suit as the main model, but resorted to using claymation as a resolution to the problem created by the rubber suit drying out due to the hot environment while filming. He seizes his terrified bride and carries her off into the uninhabited parts of the island as Jack and the crew arrive to execute their rescue of Anne. The crew opens the gate and advances after Kong and encounter a Stegosaurus. And effects-wise, whereas somebody may think it looks pretty silly by today's standards, one has to not only admire the innovation of trying something like this in 1933, but you also have to give your hats off to how well executed it was considering. After gunning down the creature, they find a body of water they have to cross and board together a raft. While in the body of water, the crew are again attacked, this time by a Brachiosaurus-like dinosaur, in, again, what are some pretty remarkable effects and cinematography for that point in time, resulting in a sequence that actually is pretty terrifying for the most part. They track down Kong, who stows his bride and confronts the advancing crew. After a ferocious attack, Jack is the only apparent crew member left alive, though Denham does reveal himself to be as well later. Anne is confronted by a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and her scream calls Kong to her aid, leaving Jack safe and leading way to one of cinema's very first epic on-screen monster battles. Kong takes on the Tyrannosaurus Rex in what is still, in my opinion, an amazing scene. I mean, come on! It's a giant freaking gorilla fighting a dinosaur! That's freaking awesome! After defeating the T-Rex with a move that should only be described as fatality, Kong carries Anne away and takes her to a cave as Jack trails behind them after telling Denham to go back to the ship and await for a signal from him indicating that he's been able to rescue Anne. When Denham reaches the ship's crew, he informs the skipper about Kong and the request to wait for a signal from Jack to confirm Anne's rescue, and they agree to wait until dawn. In the cave, Kong is attacked by a snake-like creature with legs that nearly strangles him, but Kong prevails and carries Anne to the top of the cave onto a ledge where he sits her down and begins to admire her and quickly becomes highly intrigued with her, but is interrupted by a noise caused by her approaching rescuer. As Kong investigates, Anne is left vulnerable to an attack by a passing pterodactyl, but Kong quickly comes to her aid, causing the pterodactyl to drop Anne, and Jack is able to sneak her away while Kong is distracted with the battle, and they make their escape down the mountainside. They race back to the shoreline and make it back to the ship's crew safely just before Kong appears to reclaim his bride, busting through the border gates and wreaking havoc on the village. As Kong approaches the shore when the crew reaches their rowboats, he is overcome by a bomb that is thrown by Denham and collapses. Denham seizes the opportunity to market off of this magnificent beast and instructs his crew to restrain Kong so that they can haul him back to America and make him a star. On the big opening night of Kong's grand revelation to the world in New York City, Denham revels in his preemptive success in the box office earnings, but credits Anne as being the real story, spinning his Beauty and the Beast angle to the press. He walks on stage and introduces Kong as the 8th wonder of the world and reveals the giant gorilla restrained by chrome steel chains. He's joined on stage by Jack and Anne, whom he announces are engaged to be married the following day, and invites the press on stage to take pictures of Kong and the couple. But Kong perceives the lights from the photos as a threat to Anne and becomes enraged, busting out of the chains and sending the theater into a panic. Kong busts through the theater walls and makes his way onto the streets of New York, seeking out his bride. He eventually finds her while scaling a building and reaches through the window of her room, pulls her out, and carries her off. He wreaks havoc through New York City with Anne in tow and eventually makes his way to the Empire State Building, climbing to the top. Just in case there is anyone out there that hasn't yet had the opportunity to check out this iconic film, I won't reveal the final events, but I will say that I highly recommend that you go check it out for yourself and come back and tell me what you thought about it in the comments below. Honestly, the story is great, but it is a little all over the place. There's just a lot going on. You've got the plot with Denham and King Kong, you've got the plot with Jack and Anne, and you've got the plot with Anne and King Kong. Now, I don't necessarily feel that this negatively affects the movie in any way because there are so many exciting elements, and it certainly doesn't get boring. It also flows in a very cohesive way, so it's extremely easy to follow despite all of this. The score is highly intense and energetic, and definitely helps to accompany the story well. The acting is definitely serviceable, especially when keeping in mind that we're dealing with a period in time where actors were just getting used to non-silent films, and attempting to translate their on-stage dialogue delivery skills onto on-screen dialogue delivery skills. The direction and cinematography are also extremely impressive. There are some really eye-catching shots that definitely help to accompany the story in a big way. It's a visually stunning film, even by today's standards in my opinion. As I've already stated, the special effects were, at that time, extremely groundbreaking and introduced methods of practical effects that ended up becoming a huge milestone in the field and paving the way for some of the effects that you still see carried over into films today. Now, in my opinion, the movie's highlights are the monster battles and encounters. These scenes still hold up pretty well as being very visually exciting and entertaining. And the climax and ending are filled with action, terror, and drama, and really help to drive the theme of the movie all the way home. But I won't stand here and tell you that this movie isn't without its faults. Being a product of 1933 America, there are some extremely outdated and uncomfortable portrayals in the film that would likely be considered offensive by today's standards. Another con for me is the love story between Anne and Jack, and I don't mean to say that I oppose its existence, but it just feels kind of unsubstantial the way that it all plays out. Almost as if you could tell it was just a side thought. I mean, he smacks her on accident when she first arrives, acts like a then sort of apologizes, then acts like a then rescues her, only then to put her in harm's way again willingly, so that he'd have to rescue her again. How romantic? Again, I try to keep in perspective the period of time that we're talking about, but still, seems pretty silly. Lastly, and this is really just a nitpick on the DVD itself, but when you start the film, you'll first see a screen that reads Overture, and it's accompanied by some beautiful music, presumably composed by the movie's composer, Max Steiner. But this still screen lasts for 4 minutes and 13 seconds. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand why it was there. They did that in the movie theaters back then to allow people to get their concessions and to get in their seats before the film actually started. But was it really necessary to include it on the DVD? All 4 friggin' minutes of it? And this is before you ever get to see the Radio Pictures introduction screen before the movie starts. So if you happen to be watching this on DVD, just skip past it. It really serves no purpose at all. And I'm not sure if this applies to the Blu-ray release or the digital versions either, but if somebody out there watching knows, please let me know in the comments. Now, we move on to the 1954 larger-than-life Toho classic, Godzilla. Directed by Ishirô Honda and starring the talents of Akira Takarada, Momoko Kochi, Akihito Hirata, and Takashi Shimura, and featuring a brilliant score by Akira Ifukube. To say I love this movie would be a huge understatement. I love this movie and easily give it a score of 9 out of 10. The movie opens in a body of water as a boat carrying a group of sailors is struck with a large beam of heated light from an unseen source below the water. The beam destroys the ship, setting it on fire and sinking it, leaving no survivors on board. We then see one of the movie's main protagonists, Hideto Ogata, played by Akira Takarada, who, like many of the actors who worked on the early Godzilla films, went on to be a recurring actor for many of the movies throughout the history, even being credited with an appearance in the 2014 Legendary Pictures release of Godzilla. I actually had the incredible honor of meeting the actor at a local con last year in 2020, just before everything was shut down by the pandemic, and I'll forever be grateful to have had the opportunity to do that. That was actually the first time at one of these things that I really fanboyed out. I mean, it was awesome. But anyways, back to the movie. Ogata is called away from his girlfriend, Emiko, due to the Coast Guard receiving a distress call regarding the Aiko Maru, a 75,000-ton freighter that had been reported lost. After arriving, he's told that the vessel suddenly exploded and that all communications halted just after they received the SOS. They await the Bingo Maru, a secondary ship, to arrive with more information, but that ship is also attacked by the underwater beam and destroyed. A search is conducted for any surviving crew members, and 3 sailors are discovered in the water by a group of men on a small fishing boat. Once aboard, they tell the men about their incredible experience, claiming that the ocean blew up. As the fishing boat carrying the survivors heads to its destination, Odo Island, the Coast Guard receives a distress call reporting that the boat has suffered the same attack as the rest. The headlines roll, and we're taken to a shot of people sitting along the shoreline at Odo Island looking out into the waters hoping to find any survivors, when suddenly a young man, Sinkchi, eyes something out in the water, and the old man sitting next to him confirms that it's a raft. They alert the people and retrieve the survivor, who turns out to be Sinkchi's older brother, Masaji. Masaji exclaims that a monster was responsible for the destruction of the boat, before collapsing from exhaustion. When the fishermen of the island are unable to catch any fish and return to the shore, the old man theorizes the monster behind the attacks must be Godzilla. But the younger generation of villagers brush off his theories, believing them to be the ravings of a crazy old man. A reporter arrives to gather information on the story, and the old man reveals to him the legend of Godzilla, saying they used to sacrifice girls to him so that he wouldn't eat everyone on the island, as they observe an exorcism ceremony from the old days. That night, heavy winds overtake the island, and Shinkichi and Masashi are awakened by the crashing sounds of falling objects all around them. Shinkichi impulsively races outside to investigate, and Masashi hears a scream from his brother before the house collapses around him and his mother. A good bit of the island is laid to waste, and the following day survivors are taken by bus to testify each of their accounts in front of a committee, and after they've spoken, they hear the testimony of expert paleontologist Dr. Yamane, who alludes to his belief in the possibility of the existence of fantastic creatures they have yet to fathom, stating that the world has many hidden pockets that contain many secrets that are yet to be discovered. But as a man of science, he requests the formation of a fact-finding party for a full investigation. As the research party departs, a mysterious figure with an eye patch looks on, revealed to be Dr. Serizawa, Emiko's traditionally intended suitor. When the research party arrives at Odo Island, they discover that a particular well has been contaminated with radioactivity, but are stumped as to why the wells on the other side of the island remain unaffected. Dr. Yamane, who is revealed to be Emiko's father, discovers a large footprint that turns out to be highly radioactive, and within the footprint, discovers some type of small ancient creature that he describes as an incredible discovery. Just then, an alarm bell is sounded and everyone is called to hasten to the hillside of the island. Dr. Yamane claims he saw what looked like a creature from the Jurassic period just before we see Godzilla reveal himself to audiences for the very first time. Now, to me, this is an incredibly big and epic moment, especially when we hear that roar for the first time. Now, of course, again, by today's standards, a lot of people probably would say this looks pretty silly, but I honestly can't help but admire the creativity and the ingenuity that went into trying to execute this pretty fantastic idea of this giant destructive reptilian creature on film. And truthfully, in most of the shots, the suit looks pretty good. I said in most shots, and that shot with the roar in particular, in my opinion, really sells it well. That and the convincingly genuine look of terror on the actors and actresses' faces as they scurry about to get away. I think it's an amazingly executed introduction for this iconic monster. The party retreats and gathers around while Dr. Yamane delivers a presentation providing his theories into the origins of the creature, whose environment and genetics were drastically altered by a nuclear blast from an H-bomb, citing the high levels of radiation discovered at the sites on the island and on the small creature discovered in the footprint. The Counter-Godzilla headquarters is established as an effort to find a way to stop the creature and destroy it, though Dr. Yamane feels that the creature should be preserved and studied. The reporter is assigned to interview Dr. Serizawa, who is publicly understood to be the future son-in-law of Dr. Yamane's despite Emiko's relationship with Ogata. Emiko reassures Ogata of her love for him, stating that she sees Serizawa as an older brother and that she will decline the suitorship. Just then, the reporter arrives and asks her to help in obtaining an interview with Serizawa after attempting to do so by himself and being rejected. While there, the reporter attempts to collect information about Dr. Serizawa's latest research, hearing from sources that it will drastically impact the Counter-Godzilla effort, but Serizawa refuses to divulge any details of his work and denies the source's credibility, giving the reporter nothing useful. The doctor apologizes for not being able to be more helpful, and the reporter leaves. But Emiko stays, presumably with the intention of breaking the news to him about her plans to marry Ogata. But once alone, she inquires about what he's working on, and he agrees to show her, but swears her to secrecy. They descend down into his laboratory, where he shows her a large aquarium full of sea life and drops a sample of material into it before flipping a switch. The audience isn't shown what happens to the aquarium, but we do see Emiko and Serizawa's terrified reactions to whatever occurs. Before Emiko leaves, he again expresses the imperativeness of her secrecy. When Emiko returns home and is about to join the others for dinner, an alarm goes off, alerting the citizens of Tokyo that Godzilla is approaching. Godzilla hits Tokyo for the first time and wreaks havoc on the city in what is a collection of some of the coolest looking shots in cinema history, although this is just a warm-up for what comes later. He is a purely unstoppable force of destruction, impervious to any artillery they are able to fire against him. Homes, businesses, railways, trains, and a bridge are all laid to waste as Godzilla tears his way through the city before returning to the bay. Additional military assistance arrives and a plan is developed to create a large electronically fenced barrier around the borders of the bay, hoping that if Godzilla should come ashore again, that the amount of electrical energy dispersed by the fence when he makes contact will be enough to electrocute him and stop him in his tracks. After the construction of the barrier is completed, we're taken to a scene where Ogata and Emiko await Dr. Yamani's arrival at home so that Ogata can officially ask permission to wed Emiko. But when Yamani arrives, he expresses his discouragement of the deadly course of action chosen to take against Godzilla, as he holds firm in believing that he should be studied and not destroyed. Ogata disagrees, seeing Godzilla as a threat that has to be stopped, and Yamani becomes angered, demanding that Ogata leave. Ogata apologizes to Emiko and asks for one more chance to speak to him when he's calmed down, but they are interrupted by an emergency bulletin announcing that Godzilla is again returning to Tokyo's shores. When Godzilla approaches the fence, he is unaffected by the electrical charge dispersed and tears through the defensive barrier with ease, and ensues a second attack on Tokyo, but this time unleashing his atomic breath to accommodate the destruction, using what are, again, some pretty impressive effects considering the time period. This is the major point of action in the film. He lays Tokyo to complete waste. And as a viewer, you can't help but be in total awe of the scale of destruction that occurs. Again, some of the shots here are simply amazing, creating a scene that feels extremely overpowering and ferocious. But this doesn't just come across as fun, wanton destruction. The directing, the score, the set, the effects, and acting all pull together very well to create a highly intense, horrifying, and traumatizing experience. This is what separates the first Godzilla movie from most other monster films, including most of its subsequent films. It isn't just a silly monster movie, a literal monster of destruction that arose from mankind's conquest to destroy one another through nuclear testing. This also provides substance for the destruction left in Godzilla's wake, giving it much more weight and making it feel much more consequential. And again, for anyone out there who may be watching that has not yet had the opportunity to check out this awesome classic, I won't go any further into the story, but I do highly recommend, again, that you go check it out for yourself and come back and let me know what you think. For me, this movie hits all of the major high points. The story, I think, is very well structured, it's easy to follow, it flows cohesively and coherently, and it stays well focused throughout the film. Even with the implied love triangle subplot between Emiko, Ogata, and Serizawa, it never seems to draw too much attention away from the movie's major focus or theme, and the moments that are dedicated to it move along at an appropriate pace. Each character is given a purpose and plays a substantial role in the development of the story. The theme itself is hugely powerful, again alluding to the idea that people's thirst for wanton destruction ultimately creates the ultimate being of wanton destruction. And the conclusion is substantial, purposeful, dramatic, and powerful. It's a beautifully executed scene. The film is well directed and features some excellent cinematography. The score is intense, dramatic, and menacing. If you just close your eyes and listen to the music, you feel like something monstrous is approaching. Like the stakes couldn't be any higher. And the acting is stellar, and I don't just mean from the main cast. I mean everybody plays their parts well. As I mentioned earlier, the looks on the extras' faces whenever Godzilla is tearing through the city is genuinely convincing. It's actually nearly impossible for me to find anything bad to say about this movie. But if I had to pick something to point out as a flaw, I would say that there are just a couple of shots where the costume looks outright goofy. But pitted against the many other shots where the suit looks absolutely great, and also considering the limitations of the technology at that time, it's pretty easy to overlook, and in my opinion, it really doesn't distract from the movie's overall greatness. I will say that it isn't necessarily a fun film. The tone of it is very serious, which contrasts pretty greatly from the majority of other monster movies out there, especially the ones released afterwards. But what it lacks in fun, it makes up for in ferocity. But if you haven't seen it, again, go check it out for yourself and come back and let me know what you think. So, which one reigns supreme in the OG film department? The mighty King Kong or the atomically breathed king of the monsters, Godzilla? Well, they're both definitely awesome in my perspective. I mean, King Kong is an exciting, adventurous, and engaging movie from start to finish, and it's definitely a visually stunning achievement of its time. I definitely consider it to be an epic movie, though it does suffer from a few outdated variables. Godzilla is a highly intense and dramatic film. And although it features a giant reptilian creature, it's actually more based in reality given the theme of the film and what causes Godzilla to appear in the first place. It's fantastic, but it makes sense. It's probably less epic, but I would consider it to be a little more iconic because it calls out such an important issue in a very profound and creative way. Personally, I am more of a Godzilla fan, and I do feel that his introductory film is a superior film to that of The Mighty Kong, but not by much, as both films and both characters are great. Thank you guys for checking this out. I hope everybody's doing well, and I'll see you all in the next video.